Hello, everybody. This is the morning in Brooklyn, and this is 8 o'clock and some minutes of January 4th. January 4th, of course, brings memories of January 6th, but we'll get there in course of 2 days to the anniversary. My name is Yuri Dashevsky. This is my channel called My New York Company, and I'm here with my old friend, I can say so, right, Nick? NICHOLAS CHAMBERAS, Brooklyn, a rare bird, a Republican political consultant, worth his salt, very knowledgeable, energetic, and writing person. I don't know too many political consultants who write political articles or historical articles. So, Nick, always a pleasure to see you and a pleasure to read uh, your thoughts on the Newsmax and recently. Washington Times, right? The commentary.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good
So,
morning. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to your audience. Thank you for the support and your very, very kind words. Um,
my audience is now yours, if I may say so.
Thank you. I
And
hope
for a
I'm not
while,
blushing, but
my
yeah,
channel is mostly in Russian, and I just want to say to whoever is listening, and it's mostly in Russian. But there is a lot of people who come to be in the company for in our company for a while, and a lot of them speak English, and a lot of them send their best regards afterwards. After we do the programs in English.
yeah, and like we've discussed before, I think this is a year where you're going to see broad expansion to not just to your Russian audience, which you will, but to a broadening audience throughout the country. This is one of the best quality shows in Russian and in English around. It's informative. It provides analysis. When someone makes a controversial point or a point that needs reference, you bring it up. You're not a sycophant, but it's a great conversation. It's civil, it's friendly, it's enjoyable, and I think the audience would love it. So it's always a pleasure to come on here. I've had some stuff come out, in the Washington Times and Newsmax as usual. I really don't know where to start with which stuff. If you could just give me a little bit of a nudge.
Of
Um,
course, of course. As I said, I'm very interested in what you wrote about H1B debacle, so to speak, as the our lefty media is trying to present it. It was when I read about those things happening inside Doge. And forgive me for my ignorance, but I think about the founding fathers who fought like it was their own, not like we see in the last number of dozens of years where everything becomes just performative, but they really fight with all they have. So if you could expand on
yeah,
this, please.
I I was published a little bit sooner than I thought I would be regarding the H1B topic, and you know I was watching it because it was particularly interesting to me because, as I mentioned in my op-ed, I'm a proud first generation American. My parents could never dream of having the opportunity to go to high school, and forget about getting a degree in engineering or a postgraduate degree in engineering. And it seemed that the debate the debate was focused on advanced degrees and who's best suited to come to this country. Um, and then obviously, if you were following this, and hopefully, even if you weren't following it, it accelerated. It broke out. There were several insults hurled back and forth. Um, I think some people in this on both sides were well-meaning, where others came across as just really arrogant and almost mocking American culture, which surprised me. President Trump came out after the digital melee and cited in support of H-1B visas. But I think it's important to note, while I think we should support the president's position on it, and I wrote it, um, if President Trump thinks we should keep the H-1B program, I trust him. We elected him. We fought really hard.
Yesterday was a great day of vindication of his policies, and there was nothing like the previous one with Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy.
Right. Exactly. Well said. And we have to understand, though, President Trump came out in support of the H-1B visa program. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be drastically reformed and changed, and the widespread fraud and abuse will be rooted out. So I think people like Elon Musk, who have the best intentions, and the man is a genius. It's not the only genius in the world, but he's one of the few. He was very passionate about this. But I think the people who had this sort of closeted anti-American view about dumb, lazy Americans, and we're going to put the H-1B cap now to 500,000 a year. This was their Waterloo. Yes, President Trump came out in support of the H-1B visa program. And logically, think about it this way, okay? If you're a small tech company based in Tuscaloosa, I'm just that city just came to mind for whatever reason, right? And you need workers at a certain salary. You just can't find them anywhere. You want to grow. You can't. You're facing issues. You're having challenges. And there's somebody abroad, very qualified, who wants to come over on an H-1B visa to work here. Great. That's not what's happening with this program. This program has been used to suppress and depress American wages, to cost thousands of graduates entry-level jobs, getting their foot in the door, so to speak. It has depressed wages. And basically, the tech companies are using it to rig the system, to game the system. And after what happened, that's going to stop. I think, you see Stephen Miller, the president's advisor, has talked about this. And hopefully what's going to happen is that we'll repurpose this program so that it's based on legitimate need, not having Disney get thousands of these visas pre-approved and then have mass layoffs and cause the outgoing workers are literally training their replacements just so that they can keep their severance. That's unconscionable. We can't support that, and we have to put a stop to it. But another thing is, I think the debate on immigration is misguided. What kind of immigrants do we want coming here? We want, and a college degree is a plus, obviously. But do we want people who are going to work hard and love this country? Of course. That should be the basic criteria. That is more important to me than a PhD of someone who hates Americans. I don't know if we had this conversation. Did I ever tell you about the Iranian doctor?
You may have, but it's useful to refresh things like this.
So this happened a number of years ago.
The Magdeburg scumbag who did this carnage prior to Christmas on the early December. He was a doctor from Saudi Arabia.
Oh wow!
So that was, but he didn't come on a visa. I think he came just to make more money.
No, it's a great point, and it's a good segue because I was speaking to this man, and brilliant physician by all accounts. I'd spoken to him before, and he hated this country. And you know what? God bless freedom of expression in the United States. The First Amendment is sacred, as are all our amendments in our Constitution. And he decided to engage me, and he thought that suicide bombings were a legitimate form of political expression, even if scores of civilians were killed. He was not kidding. At first, I thought he was kidding, but he was very serious about this. And he had this very elitist view of who should be allowed to vote and who shouldn't be allowed to vote. And I'm thinking to myself, how many of these people do we really want in this country? Is this helping us? So we need to focus on Forget about what degrees do they have, how much money they're going to make in their first year. We need to have, obviously we need to close the border, but that's another issue entirely. But we need immigration, not nearly as much as it's taking place now. We need to bring the best and the brightest, but bringing the best and the brightest doesn't necessarily mean they have to have a degree in engineering. And our country is enriched, it's empowered when we bring good people here of high integrity and character who will assimilate. Of course, people coming in from whatever country, they may love their native land as well, but they have to love the United States. And we've been bringing in too many people who view the United States as some sort of venture capitalist business opportunity to take as much as possible without giving back. We can't keep bringing immigrants here who hate the country. And that's basically what we've been doing since Obama. And these tech companies in Silicon Valley, they don't care if someone's going to be loyal to the United States. They have a bottom line. They want to look at their bottom line. We need to bring people here who are going to work hard, who are going to love the country, who are going to put roots here, who are going to invest in the economy. STEM is important, science, technology, mathematics, but so is someone opening a small business in an area that is maybe in decline and isn't populated. Teaching other people, teaching Americans things that skills that they may not have gotten. So I think this debate was misdirected. I think H-1B visas have been grossly abused. As I wrote in my op-ed, there's one company, I don't want to mention them, but they were crushed with punitive damages for discriminating against non-H-1B workers, highly productive workers. They planned their termination and to replace them systematically over the course of years, all of these workers with H-1B. H-1B is supposed to be, if there's a need, we can't fill the need, bring someone over. It's not supposed to be to drastically reduce wages, to drastically reduce the quality of life, to basically crush the hopes and aspirations of somebody who may not have come out of MIT. Maybe someone came out of mid-tier college. It doesn't, they have some student loans. It doesn't mean they should have to take a job making $21,000 a year. In the long run, that hurts the economy.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. I know a couple of people who came here to work, and I assume it was H-1B. And what happens is that nowadays, using all kinds of cloud computing and Zooms and various variations thereof, and then all those remote opportunities that technology gives today, people can pay people on businesses can pay people on the spot wherever they live: Mumbai, Bangalore, Minsk, Tashkent, wherever in the world they can find those workers. And I've dealt with owners that say we have their own kind of affiliates, offices where people would sit and do the programming and coding that is required, and that would take a lot of money to accomplish on the business side. If they would do it here, compared to what people are happy with living there. I was living in Soviet Union or newly minted Uzbekistan, from which I came here, and the salary was like $5 a month at the peak of inflation. $5 a month. It was suggested that people would steal whatever is missing from their lifestyle, and did they still? So that and I was lucky to make $20 a month at one point. So it was like drastic difference in standards of living, if you may say so, in connection with $20 a month at the time. Now it's different, but still they pay them much less. But H-1B in many situations is a carrot. They say you work hard, we bring you to the United States. So when they bring a person like this to the United States, obviously they don't bring anybody, who's not worth their salt, right? So they would come as professionals. They would come as someone who is whatever is in their hearts is a whole different story. But professionally, they are obviously up to the task that they're supposed to perform here. Uh, if people bring somebody just because they cannot verbalize it and they need to show with their hands what they want from this worker to accomplish, that's a whole different story. But bringing people, of course, on the scope of Disney World, Disneyland, and by saying that you cannot hire Americans here, it's unconscionable, absolutely, and I agree with that. Another thing that the immediately when we read this article, when I read this article by Vivek Ramaswamy, one of the things that popped up in my mind was there is a culture and there's a culture, and there's also yogurt, right? Which is also culture. We don't talk about yogurt today, later, maybe. But there's a culture, really. There is one real American culture that sells all over the world like crazy, and we're doing so since the end of 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and doing well still. And then there is a subculture that grew up on this because they wanted, like everything else, they wanted to exploit it in terms of to achieve their Marxist, communist ends. And that's a little bit of a paradox that a lot of people who created, say, Hollywood, they came from Europe and they brought the values with them. And big part of the values was socialist beliefs, and they were happy to escape. Why would they come to this country instead of fighting for socialism in Europe? Because they didn't want to fight. They just wanted to get it. They wanted to have it, but they didn't have the bloodthirstiness in most cases. So they found a way to do it culturally. And then the Soviet scale helped with the Frankfurt School and various Adornos and Marcuses and everything else. So all these cultural icons of the left. So they came, but they were doing honest jobs. Those people written those. Movies written by socialists and communists who came from Europe, from Russia, from Poland, from Germany, from Britain. They were honest jobs because people had their own beliefs. They were non-violent. They didn't apply themselves in this field as violent extremists. They just made movies that people loved it because it was about life. It was like look at the Ernest Hemingway, right, where his heart was actually. But the books are great. Literature is a great thing. That it kind of something absurd, It's not written for. I mean, it has little to do with the personality of the author sometimes, and it has little to do with the personality of the reader. But they meet inside this book and this whole world where everybody discovers something new about themselves. I mean, the writer and the reader. So, and parasites that we see today in failing CNN, ABC, BBC, and all the C's, and the Canadian Broadcast Company, also not far from them. But all those monsters and little monsters and bigger monsters, they want to bend culture in their direction. So we get a lot of crap. And there's a lot of demand recently because of the technology and the expansion of free time for people and the sedentary lifestyle for a big part of population. So they're there. They fulfill it with a lot of garbage. And this is the garbage culture that I think Vivek meant when he said not so complimentary things about American culture.
Well,
We have this rot inside our culture.
well, let me say that I take great exception with what Vivek Ramaswamy said, particularly since just a year ago when he was campaigning for president. Now, not to take anything away from Vivek Ramaswamy, he's a brilliant guy. Great speech when he graduated high school. Phenomenally successful in business, and I don't want to denigrate him or take away anything from his accomplishments. I would like to say that when you're chosen and trusted by President Trump to serve in his cabinet in such an integral, vital role, you have to be careful with what you put out there. Not because we don't have freedom of expression.
No, that I agree wholeheartedly. The less is more in this case.
Yeah, because it's interesting because you represent the administration. You're a representative of the administration. And his comments were not only wrong, they were obnoxious. Now, I'm not saying that was his motive. I'm not questioning his love or patriotism or his commitment to the United States. But, and again, I understand that people will say he meant certain other things, but to someone reading this, they're just looking at it and saying like, wow, dude, you really got upset that you didn't date the cheerleader when you were in high school or that you weren't on the football team. No one would confuse me with having dated a lot of cheerleaders in high school or been on the football team. I am proud to have been a student at Fort Hamilton High School, Go Tigers, in Brooklyn, New York. We almost won the championship again after all these years, but lost to Brooklyn Tech in a very disappointing loss, but the future is very bright. But you have to understand what he wrote and what he said is basically what these obnoxious, arrogant aristocrats from abroad, how they picture the United States, like lazy, dumb American nonsense. America is innovative and successful because we work hard. I don't know where in the world he got this idea that Americans don't work hard, but most Americans work too much.
Yeah.
Instead of not enough. Yes, believe me, everyone has the coworkers and can point to the examples of the lazy people, the drains, the parasites, of course. But to suggest that there's a culture problem with our workforce is ridiculous. The problem with our workforce is that Barack Obama got a third term when Joe Biden won the presidency. And the damage they've done to this country is enormous. If you look at the manufacturing sector, what they've done, and even before that, when, and I'm sorry, I'll get back to his comments in just a moment, but I'll give you an example. When I went to college, I had to work as a cashier part-time at a supermarket. I worked in an area that was once a booming industrial town with so many factories and so many people, upper middle class families, and so many smart people, right? And I'll never forget some of the people I met when I went there, because all of these factories at the time started closing. And I started studying there at a time when thousands of people had just been laid off and thousands more were about to lose their jobs. I was working with engineers from Ivies who were mopping floors. There's no shame in mopping floors. But when you have a mortgage and 3 kids to feed and you've done all the right things, we really need to have a conversation about what's wrong with our country. And it's not the work ethic. Because when you have an engineer, an American engineer, who humbles themselves, puts in for as many hours as possible, doing any job that's possible just to make just to help their family survive, that's nothing to scoff at. That's nothing to denigrate. Then you would see these beautiful homes. I'll never forget this. You would see homes and from Brooklyn, you see the prices in Brooklyn, right? You would see homes that in Brooklyn right now would fetch $2.5 million. You see these homes on sale for $65,000. There was this one house, and again, I remember this beautiful house, right? $65,000 across the street from me. And I'm like, wow, they're gonna snap that thing up. 4 months pass, the sign said $60,000. They eventually sold it for $50,000. So American industry has been devastated by rigging the system, which is what brought President Trump into office in 2016, and which is why he did so well in 2020 without saying anything controversial, and
We should, by the way.
which is why the 2024 win was so impressive. We want to get back to making America great again, to putting the American worker first. And there are lazy workers and lazy people in every country. Vivek Ramaswamy should know that. And then what happened is why I said that you have to be careful when you represent it, when you're part of the administration. It opened the floodgates for these obnoxious people. Did you hear what Patrick Bet-David said?
No.
The valuetainment guy. Oh, the party is too right. The right wing of the Trump coalition. Let's get this real. President Trump won on the MAGA agenda, not on the cheap imitation of Primerica that made Patrick Bet-David. And
crap intimidation.
And he's talking about working 80 hours and doing the work. Let's cut the crap. Who really believes that guy works 80 hours a week or ever worked 80 hours a week? I know people who work 80 hours a week. There's plenty of people, not just in the United States and other countries. They have no choice. Some do it lovingly. The idea that there's this dumb, lazy American worker must be put to bed. Now, if you're representing the Trump administration, you really shouldn't be making comments like that. That's not what brought President Trump into office.
I agree. Discipline is important.
That's not the premise. Yeah, that's not the premise that the administration is working on. Our problem in America is that these globalists, these weird left socialists have targeted other countries. They thought they could, they thought they saw an opportunity to infiltrate the United States, and they've done a lot of damage. That's the problem. We need tax cuts. We need deregulation. We need more business-friendly policies. If you want to fight for that, absolutely. Please don't conflate that by saying that we have an issue with American workers. We have plenty of American workers. Like I said, I'm not a xenophobe. I'm not someone who wants to preclude immigration. We need immigration, legal immigration. But we need to have an honest conversation about how much immigration we need and the kinds of people we're bringing into the country. So, again, not to attack him, but it's, I think what Vivek said is much more different than what Elon Musk said. Because Elon Musk almost seemed to be like, hey, this program brings a lot of smart people in this country. Let's keep it. Yes, he got heated. He made some interesting analogies. But the point is that he wasn't attacking the American workers. Vivek Ramaswamy said that, and then you have Patrick Bet-David coming out and saying those ridiculous things. And then some other just fools, like some guy was attacking white people, one of their friends and allies. And I'm like, when did this turn from a discussion into the use and value of the H-1B program into racist attacks against whites? There shouldn't be attacks against anybody for any reason based on race.
Of course.
And you have these people almost like you get scared because you realize that they are in proximity to power. And, again, it can open up a whole can of worms. And there's a lot of tangents that I could open up, but I prefer to take it back to you to see where you want to take the conversation. But we need to be very careful.
When I want to take a conversation, I just want to reprise to repeat the thought that I publicized here on this program yesterday. And I was listening to the speech of Hakeem Jeffries, the speech after the Speaker of the House was elected sensationally. Mike Johnson won with 3 votes advantage. And it was a great moment, great joy for me personally, because it was a proof of the concept. that we get a proper man in all places, and first of all, the president of the United States. But he said one thing. He said jokingly, as only he can. I call him a plastic version of Barack Obama. If somebody would like to manufacture robots, Barack Obama, like, he would come up with Hakeem Jeffries. Absolutely, an absolute automaton. So he said with a smile. So we had our elections. We recognized the results of these elections. Donald Trump won. I rephrase, and you don't want to argue over the results of these elections, right? And you like the results. We don't argue that, and you don't want to contest it too. So that was his joke. But I thought that this joke had this little caveat to it, because we need to know how not only the 2020 elections went. It was the point of many, many sleepless nights on our end. We also need to know what happened in 2024 and see all the irregularities that happened when we won. Because they how come they counted votes for what, 2 months after the
It
elections
was
in California?
ridiculous,
It's
ridiculous.
it's it's ridiculous. It's nonsense. Uh, how come in New York the difference between Democrat and Republican votes turned out to be much less than everybody projected? And one last but not least, not the last question is, where is the difference between Biden and where did it go? The difference between Biden and Trump voters in 2020 versus Kamala and Donald Trump voters in it was almost 10 million people difference between Biden and Trump, and it was much less in 2024. So almost 10 million people changed their minds on the Democrats. Allow me not to allow you to say things like this. So it all has to be publicized. I'm not saying investigation on the scope of the infamous J6 commission, and Liz Cheney is just, I don't want to talk about her. But just to know the details, how it happened, how it went, why Mark Elias erased all his tweets all of a sudden from Twitter, why we discover lots of beautiful things along the way, but it has to be summarized. It has to be put in a system, and people should be able to know if they're willing to know. There should be a place where they can read about the irregularities, both 2024 and 2020. That's all. That's what Hakeem Jeffries wanted to say. He wanted not to stimulate the discoveries in this year's election, last year's election already.
Let me say, I think that um, the MSG event that Donald Trump did shortly before the election was outstanding. And overall,
MSG Square
if,
Garden, you mean, right?
yes, yes. If not for a couple of those speakers who really should have, they should have consulted the campaign before making some of those ridiculous, outrageous remarks. If not for those remarks, I think President Trump's win would have been bigger. I think we might have taken Minnesota and even New Jersey. The momentum was huge. And as you know, I'm not a Monday morning quarterback. I came on your show last December. I said President Trump is winning these primaries huge. It's not going to be close. This is going to be over by February. After the ridiculous results of those New York trials, the show trials,
Yeah.
where they were taking these ridiculous victory laps, I said President Trump is winning in a landslide. It's not going to be close. As far as the difference in the results from 2020 to 2024, the reason Democrats waited so long to replace President Biden on the ticket was not because they didn't know about his condition, was because they knew that the party had been allowed to go so far to the left, so extreme, they almost had no one else who could replace him and still win the election. Some may think that's a controversial take. I've written about this, I put it in writing. I actually made a list of all the candidates who could possibly replace President Biden at the ticket. And I said probably the strongest one would have been Michelle Obama, and even she would have lost. But then you had Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, all to the far left. Do you really think Gavin Newsom is winning Michigan or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, which the Democrats absolutely had to win? Do you think that Gretchen Whitmer might have lost Michigan? Pennsylvania would not have been in play if Gretchen Whitmer ran. Wisconsin would have been out of reach far sooner, and then President Trump could have focused on states like Virginia, which also looks promising for the future for Republicans. So their problem was Harris was the only one who could sort of court centrist voters, who could basically, let me put it to you this way. The Democrats were in low supply of non-batshit crazy voters. They were, because their most loyal supporters were just out of their minds. They were focused on making sure that in this country you could get an abortion up until birth. In some states you still can. You can actually. Making sure that if somebody was 260 pounds, 6'2", born a male, they could play in a girls' volleyball team anytime they wanted. They didn't care about the economy. They didn't care about quality of life. They didn't care that it seemed like every other week there's a new war going on. And they had a problem. And they're going to have a problem until, and maybe they'll never go back to the center or closer to the center. But the party was moved so far to the left, to such a radical, dangerous degree, they couldn't fool people anymore. Biden won in 2020, and whatever interesting situation, but with the pandemic. But Biden won in 2020 because he was deemed a moderate. He was basically, if you look at the numbers in places like Pennsylvania, he had the credibility from working class voters, from middle class families, from union households that no one else in today's Democratic Party has. I mean, let's just say you could do a do-over tomorrow and they could pick a candidate. Who are you going to pick? Who is going to basically bring back these voters? Biden had a shot, but then you saw the debate and you realize that there's something wrong. And they couldn't continue the charade. They were desperate to cling to power. They were hoping that they could pass off Harris as this moderate. And you know what? I mean, they did a decent job of trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the voters. They were banking on the legacy media. But you know what? Legacy media is not nearly as powerful as it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah, but it's a self-inflicted wound to the head. What they have.
Well, I mean, one
in this position.
One ridiculous hoax after the other. It seems they went back to the well too often. For example, I'm going to take you years back. In 1992, Bill Clinton came out of nowhere and he opened up a big lead over President Bush, George H.W. Bush. And then the late President Bush had huge momentum and was surging towards the end of the election. Boom, Thursday, massive leak about indictments related to Iran-Contra. And, it was a coordinated media hit job that went nowhere after the election. But some say it cost him a lot of votes. It may have cost him the election. 1996, the media was basically carrying water for the second Clinton term. And then we saw it started to lift the tide in 2004 when Dan Rather tried that hoax about President Bush and the National Guard.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the beginning that started the independent journalists. And they said, you know what, that font from that typewritten letter that Rather has wasn't even created. It didn't exist during that decade. And
Charles Johnson, right? I think it was the little green footballs, like one of the first.
Yeah. And
you went a different way after that.
Yeah, and you have to understand this year the plan was the Harris campaign was dominated by so many of the Obama veterans, and they thought this was 2008 when Google was just king and you had no other options, suppress everything that Trump did. But you saw with so many, with Truth Social, with Twitter, everything was being fact checked in real time. I mean, for crying out loud, the ridiculous, and I don't even want to repeat the words, but the ridiculous allegations about Trump and Liz Cheney on the weekend of the campaign. I actually said, you know what? I know I've been saying it's a landslide, but now I'm almost 100%. I was 99% sure now. They're panicking. I mean, if
Panic
this
mode.
is what they've got, you know, when he was making an analogy about how people are eager to send our young men and women into war, and they're trying to turn it into this, I knew they were in trouble. The Democrats, they're banking on their comeback is based on the low propensity Trump voter, and it starts in 2026. The issue is the problem that Republicans are going to have in 2026 is that we saw this in 2016, we saw this in 2020, we saw this in 2024. There are voters who will only come out to vote for President Trump. They will literally leave the rest of the ballot blank. They will vote for President Trump. They don't identify as Democrat. They don't identify as Republican or even independent. They hate politics. They only come out for President Trump. And this is why we've done, he pulled off such a shock to the establishment because of these low propensity Trump voters who will turn out, who will walk over broken glass to vote for President Trump, but don't show up during the midterms. That's going to be a big problem. Obviously, not all of them leave the ballots blank, but this is a problem. We need to get the candidates back. We need to get those voters to show up in 2026. And the Democrats are basically banking that these people are not going to show up. They're thinking, their view is this is going to be 2006 all over again, where they took back the House. They had huge gains, and they basically paralyzed, they handcuffed the second Bush administration. That's the exact game plan. And there's a possibility if we don't get our act together, that's exactly what's going to happen. And that's why I take exception when you have members of the administration calling American workers lazy and attacking the culture and attacking people who play sports. We've just given them a nice head start towards that. So that's why it's disappointing. No more victory laps. The work is just beginning. There's been so much damage done to this country. 4 years is going to go by a lot sooner than people realize. It's not as much time, I need to say. 4 years is nothing to try to recover and repair the damage done by the Obama-Biden administrations. So I'm worried about 2026.
No, everybody is, and again, we have certain advantages at this point, and we need to get prepared for this. And I think that the full history of the elections of 2020 and 2024 is so instrumental. So that would be something that we could kind of rely upon in the analysis of what is to come in 2026. And of course, what doesn't come out of the magician's sleeve is the good politicians who are able to lead people, because we have a severe lack of those on both sides. But on the Democrat side, they have this money fundraising machine, and they have the huge volunteer force, really huge, and they work almost like a paramilitary units, and we have nothing of the sort on the on the Republican side. And people would come. I worked this elections. This is what I have proudly by my side. Like this, right? This is my tag, and I worked the scanner. So I saw people coming with the ballots filled out, and they would run it through the scanner, and I would give them a sticker, and I would say, "Have a good day. Thank you for voting." And sometimes it didn't go. I sound like Borat at some points for more fun. But yeah, and sometimes it didn't go through because they didn't mark it properly. They didn't read the instructions. They cannot read English or any of the languages that are there on the ballot. So I would help them, and inadvertently, of course, I would see how they voted. And they voted like this. Most of them, they voted like, I don't know, like six Democrats, Trump on top, then six Democrats, then three Republicans. They clearly didn't. They say I asked them. Some of them I knew, and I said, "Why didn't you vote? You know, like along the party line? Say you vote for Harris, and you want to see all the Democrats. You want for Trump. You want to see all the Republicans." They say, "Well, I don't know these people. I don't know who they are. They never came to me." That's simple. They never reached out. I never saw them on television. I don't know their faces. This year there was minimal in terms of it was a chance. We have such a strong uh, locomotive. Presidential elections. President Trump. Everybody's coming. Always like three times more than the odd year elections. Uh, uh, and they never used it. The Republicans never used it. Not a single attractive picture or not attractive picture of a candidate. No mentioning of a party on both sides. They just say vote for me and the name and the sun coming up. That's it.
Well,
It's not enough. It's enough to spend the money and to give it to their friends at the print shop, but not enough to not enough to win. And that was very dispiriting because it's a great American contest. You know, we may look at it tragically, we may look at it comically, but it's a great tradition. It's a competition. It's a Super Bowl of the greatest scope, and why not to buy a little ticket to to be part of it?
um, well, look, I'm laughing because we both know that I can take up another four of your shows just by starting to talk to give anecdotes about what goes on in New York state politics, especially with candidates from our side. And I assiduously and diligently work very hard to avoid bringing up names and groups because I don't necessarily know if that will help anything. I would like to say that the problem in New York is this defeatist culture. We have too many powerful people on the right in New York, local and state politics, who could not give a bleep about electing Republicans. They have made a tidy little industry in helping themselves from losing. They don't
Yeah.
care about losing. And we don't need to say names. And I don't want to give examples because then I'll infuriate people and it's not going to help. Maybe I'll feel better. Maybe some people will start to understand why this is happening. But if we really want to change things in New York, we need to have people on the national stage, national level, take interest and get involved and look into things. I'll just give you some examples. Why in the world was it so hard to get a Trump sign in New York? It's ridiculous. You had to know people who knew people who knew people to get a Trump sign. And we saw some other recent campaigns, and I don't want to say anything, where same thing. In New York, if you're a Republican and you have somebody who wants to put up your lawn sign, go there, deliver it in person. I had a candidate who actually used to do that in a very heated competitive race. The problem in New York is too many of the most influential people could not care any less about winning. And the people who want to win, who they're earnest in trying and working hard, they're basically targeted not always, but in many cases, as troublemakers who upset the apple cart. And without mentioning names, there's one amazing elected official in New York City who was targeted by the party bosses for years, um, before they were able to prevail and fight for common sense in New York. So until that changes, unless that changes, we're going to have the same problem in New York. It's dispiriting. You have so many people leaving the state who love New York but just cannot afford to live in New York anymore, who just can't afford to stay. And we lose election after election after election because certain people, again, they're in very powerful positions and they don't want competition. They don't want actually trying, they don't care about actually trying to win elections. That's not part of their priority. And you see that just in the recruitment. I was looking at the numbers in some of these districts, and we lost some tight races. Um, if we had more money, we might have pulled through in those races. But then you look at some other districts, and we're running some absolute wackadoodles, um, representing the party. That doesn't help. That doesn't help the state ticket. That doesn't help the party. So I hope that more normal people get involved in local party organizations, that they start their own party organizations. I hope we can understand how serious things are. It's not just about congestion pricing in New York. It's not just about the marijuana, but when you have a legislature that will not change bail reform, how powerful, what significance is it, right? Um, so we need some new energy. We need to focus on having money in New York races, not just sending money to the rest of the country. And we need to recruit much better candidates. We need to recruit much better candidates, and we need to recruit candidates who understand that it's not going to be as easy as it's presented to them. Because what happens usually is anytime there's any decent candidate in a race, you have these people, they just swarm and they make things seem a lot easier than they really are. So if you're thinking about running for office in New York, whether it's in Staten Island, or in Buffalo or anywhere else in between, right? Um, if something is being presented to you as being easy, you're being lied to. It's not easy. If it was easy, anybody and everybody would do it. So that was a long way of saying there is hope in New York, but we need a lot of change and quickly.
No, I agree with you for the most part. I just and everybody knows who speaks Russian who's listening to this program that I ran for against Hakeem Jeffries in 2022, and I outlined it having no support from Republican Party. I neither moral nor material. I just outlined a simple way of what I've seen in the movies, of the good movies I mentioned earlier, how it's done in America. So I I made photographs of myself, flattering photos, and I made posters and I made a lot of print materials. I activated on my stream. And I tried to get interesting guests to get more interesting people to vote for me. And as you know, I got pretty good results. Yes, I lost, as we all know, but I lost to him with the biggest numbers of Republicans voting for me. And I didn't even reach out to the white populations of the congressional district 8. I mean, I tried. I emailed everybody, every sacred name in the book of Republicans, Republican saints. I emailed those people and like alphabetically, and I didn't get any airtime on the national or local national affiliates, like Fox or something like that. just to present myself. I said, listen, I won't be the last stupid, ugly person you show on television. So why not? And I'm a registered candidate. I have my whatever credentials mentioned there. So why not? No, nobody, everybody was so worried about the reputation, except myself. They would show me,
Yeah, I don't
give
think
me
it's
3 minutes of airtime
I
just
don't
to
think
show the news factor.
I don't think it's reputation. I think there's again there's opportunity, and maybe on a different show we can get more in depth about what's going on here. But it's no coincidence that we have such a hard time in New York City in particular recruiting good candidates, and not just good with a good resume, but candidates who will get out there and campaign door to door
Yeah,
and not say
that's what I
crazy,
did. That's what I did.
yeah, and not say crazy, stupid stuff that just winds up putting us in a worse place than before. That's no coincidence.
And I had my hat on, except for one photo, two photos I took. I always had my hat on. One was for the by demand of the Republican Party for their official door hanger. They asked me to take my MAGA cap off, and the other one was for the last 3 days in the supermarket on the screens. Cost me lots of money to be on the screens for like 30 seconds, and that one I did also without the cap. And there's
So
nothing to be proud of under this cap.
for the door knocker, did they provide the magnifying glass for you when they made that thing?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
it. That's not going to take it any further than that with the door
yeah,
knocker.
it's just absolutely useless. That's why I was talking about the friends and print business. But
And I'm a fan of print, by the way. I'm a fan of printing, and I had a similar situation with a candidate I ran. They raised no money basically for this candidate. We did it all by ourselves for the most part. And then when they realized that we finally had some money, we were putting out mail. They came running with the proposal of that door knocker thing, and it's like, forget about the costs. Let's not even talk about the costs. But who's going to see anybody on that thing? But anyway, let's not digress. Hopefully, we get really good, strong candidates who were hungry and active, and they can fight to change for a better New York.
and if you
Well,
have some time, I strongly recommend this experience. From my own experience, it's it's a worth the thing. If even if you lose, you don't get a. If you really try, you don't have a feeling of the time wasted, and you learn more about uh, the place you live in, and your friends, your volunteers. They also quite grateful because you introduce them to a whole different thing, and it's not all negative. And most people, from my experience, only want to see you come to them, and it gives them a feeling that you are real.
yeah, but it's also why the candidate recruitment, the candidate selection is so important. Um, you need to have qualified candidates representing the party. And years back, I worked in a campaign that was an upset to the pundits and the prognosticators. But the person running for office not only was well spoken, but they raised money. They went door to door, and this was somebody that you could see representing you. You would trust this person to represent you, and we don't have enough of those candidates. We have these people out there screaming like lunatics, trying to get a meeting with President Trump. It's great, God bless you, of course you want a meeting with President Trump. But if you're running for local office because your sole goal, really what you want to accomplish in the race, is to get your 15 seconds of fame screaming about some national issue, then it's not for you. We should focus on people who understand the local issues. Of course, who support President Trump is very important, but people who understand the local issues and who can connect on the local issues. That's the only way we'll make inroads.
And
in New York.
also, there was a little celebration recently in the neighborhood among the Republicans to celebrate again the win of 2024, the November 5, etc., etc. It was the usual 30 odd suspects came over to celebrate. And yeah, I would expect all of them wear red MAGA caps. How many people were wearing red MAGA caps?
Wow.
Two. Two people came to celebrate the win of MAGA. How many uh, candidates openly in 2024, local candidates, proclaimed they're on the Make America Great Again side?
Well,
Zero. I talked to some
considering,
of them. They said, we hardly got where we are right now. Now, if we say we're MAGA, nobody going to vote for us.
yeah, not really.
That's their thinking, not their words, not mine.
So it's funny. President Trump outpolled so many of these Republican candidates. It's ridiculous. Um, there goes the conventional wisdom. And again, this is a much deeper conversation that we could have, but candidates should be in it for the right reasons and go into it with. I understand there's some races you're never going to win, like your race against Hakeem Jeffries, which you did phenomenally. I couldn't believe it. I know I've said about this, but like you weren't going to win that race. No, but you fought as if you fought trying to win the race, and that's why you got a good result. Um, why run if you're not going to campaign to win? It's but by campaigning to win, sometimes listen, you're going to campaign to win and you're going to get 20%. But guess what? That 20% could be in a district that only went 5% for the Republican candidate previously. That's something to hang your hat on. That's something to be proud of. To run in a district where Republicans get 11% and you get 10.8%, what's the point? We really need to look at races that are winnable. We had a few races that are winnable that we lost. But we've got to have a much deeper conversation about New York. New York is full of optimism and pessimism, and there's a good argument to be made for both.
I think still, with my little practical knowledge, and you have a lot of practical knowledge, of course. I was just my first and I don't know, if not last, at the same time, foray into politics, practical politics, and I came out of it with certain convictions, and I think still that you managed to get the ear of some powerful organization or a group of people who would like to see life becoming more interesting. I don't think people who are betting on Wall Street or on the Belmont Raceway, they would be 100% sure that they will win, but just to see how you can turn the tide and what you can learn from the people you live side by side with. It's an incredible experience that worth a lot of money. Who would decide to bankroll it? It would cost not as much as they would expect, because I dealt with like $39,000 versus Hakeem Jeffries' official $5 million war chest. But and he didn't pay attention to me. We met during the campaign. We met recently when I came to meeting him on Brighton Beach, and he was there in the Jewish Community Center talking one-on-one with various people, mostly about the housing and pensions and this and that. And I came to him for the sole reason to person to person, just to tell him that I know that you think. I told him, I know what you're thinking. That you have a lot of good thinkers in the Democrat Party, sorry, and you have a lot of people who are thinking about it. And I wanted to say that you may have already thought about, just sit this one out. Let the man fix the toilet that you turned this country into. Let him do what he can do. And
Um,
then you come up with better people, better ideas. I honestly don't know. There's some say John Fetterman, some say Ocasio Cortez. I don't see him as viable candidates nationwide. They have some exposure. It's just they're not thinkers. They're not doers. They just talk. They not.
no, look, again, with John Fetterman, we didn't have the strongest possible candidate against Senator Fetterman. Not taking anything away from him, but we had some missteps in how to handle that race, as happens. The fact that he's made 2 or 3 points for common sense. Granted, he's way ahead of most of the people in his insane party, but as far as AOC, we don't give her nearly enough credit. She's a very smart, articulate young woman, very powerful, strategic, but Republicans have made a mess in terms of engaging AOC. We have never, ever, since she ran, we have never put up a serious opponent against AOC. Not one. We had a placeholder in 2018, if memory serves me correctly. You're familiar with it. Somebody that the party just always puts to have an opponent on there.
Yeah.
Then we had somebody who just did not campaign, from what I'm told. And the last couple of elections, you had a very unserious.
Where's the MTG of Corona?
Look, there are a lot of
Where's Nancy Mace of Corona?
well, stay tuned, because that district has a lot of young Republicans, young minority Republicans, but they've been held back the last few election cycles. Believe it or not, you're going to see. I predict that you're going to see a different kind of candidate, maybe more than one, a different kind of Republican candidate emerging against AOC. Someone who will be taken, again, this could be more than one person, but someone who will be taken a lot more seriously than her previous opponents, and for good reason. The Republican Party compliance and other parties' complacency, I should say, they've made AOC into this powerhouse because no one in her district has engaged her constructively. And I can give you examples, but we need another few more shows, and I value your time. I know we've got a couple of things that you wanted to talk about, but
we want an expose. We want a scandal. We want to become famous.
I don't know about becoming famous, but I'm telling you,
I don't want you to be the next Zapruder, but still.
AOC, like I said, AOC is a powerhouse. AOC may have national aspirations, but on our end, we've done a terrible job of engaging her.
Listen, we have a New York Young Republicans Club, without saying much. What is the purpose of this most powerful Republican organization in New York City? To bring young Republicans into politics, right?
Yes, and they've done.
What is the yield? Who did they promote? Tell me. It's an honest question.
Yeah,
Give me names.
I know Gavin Wax. I know Gavin Wax before most people had ever heard of him. One of the brightest.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Hands down. The New York Republican Club is part of the solution. They're not part of the problem. The problem is that there are very strong, powerful, influential people within New York State who would love to see the New York Young Republican Club end tomorrow. They would be dancing in the streets if the New York Young Republican Club did not exist. That's the problem we have. We need more candidates emerging from the New York Young Republican Club, running, competing, contesting.
That's all I want from them.
Yeah. Again, there are a lot of institutional impediments to that. And, for the most part, look, that's a very large group. It's a diverse group. You have neo-libertarians in there. You have libertarians. You have hardcore MAGA. but they all disagree in an agreeable manner. I've been to many of their events. They have great events. They have great speakers. Again, we need more like the New York Young Republican Club and less of some of these freak shows that are alternatives to what the New York Young Republicans do. Unfortunately, in many cases, you have these unserious candidates prevailing. And then we put them in the general election. And you're like, oh, what happened? It was rigged. I mean, I've seen candidates who lost by like 60, 70 points publicly claim that the election was stolen by machines. I don't care if you're a Republican candidate making that claim. I don't care if you're a Democrat candidate making that claim. If you lost the election by 60 points and you can't actually prove voter fraud, produce real evidence of voter fraud, and you make that claim, you shouldn't run again. I'm not saying it's impossible. Any election theoretically can be stolen, but if you lose by 60 points, give us some proof that the election was stolen. Don't just make these insane comments, because then what happens is, in the base case scenario, you're only discouraging Republican voters from ever coming out again and voting for you. If they think something is rigged, they're not going to come out and vote. That's why, again, I encourage people to get involved in the New York Young Republican Club. I think it's going in the right direction. There are a lot of different viewpoints that are respected in that organization. And
it's only 100 years old. The whole
only.
They're about to show some results. I've seen an interview. I respect Gavin Wax. I think he's a brilliant speaker. I had two members of Republican Club, New York Young Republican Club, here on this program, one in Russian, one in English, and they're brilliant. Everybody loved them. But show us the new elite. It's like close to.
What we need is more organizations like them to rise up in the other boroughs. We need more organizations like that in Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Staten Island. Remember, in Manhattan, there's basically no race you can possibly win, the way the lines are gerrymandered, even in the rest of New York City, right? The Democrats have designed all these firewalls and safety measures in place to make sure that they don't lose. But in South Brooklyn, there's so much room to grow the Republican Party, particularly. Even you see some opportunities now in Sunset Park, even some organizations, some people just saying they're fed up and they want to make overtures to the Republican Party. But we need organizations like that throughout the city. We need more New York Young Republican Club, not less. And I think that'll spur the other organizations to improve and enlarge and expand, and everybody working together, we can really, I think the result should not just be about boosting one candidate or another, but just let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation about the future of New York City. Just wall-to-wall weed odor. Is that really where we want our city? Bail reform has been.
You can kind of have a break and have an abortion, Nick.
Okay, then it's all worth it.
If you're tired of
then it's worth it.
Weed smell, then go have an abortion and then back to weed.
If somebody wants to, if there's a group of young ladies playing softball in a park and they want to go play, and so again, there's so much, there's opportunity there. What happens, I don't know, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that President Trump.
There are organizations, and I want to mention it in English too, because everybody knows about it in Russian. They were they called Audit and Y, and they were auditing the records, the voting records in the state of New York. And I came across them in the last days of my campaign in 2022, and I got so upset hearing all this about the falsity in the in the voter rolls, and the Lincoln voters and stuff like that. People who were born like prior to in 1850, people who registered on January 1st and 4th of July and other federal holidays when everything is closed. So they tried to weed out the whole thing. They cleaned it out, and they had some success. And they made it a point to go to every county in the state of New York to present their findings. And I wasn't one, and then I decided to do one in Brooklyn. And they came and they brought their own people, and our people came there. So what I'm saying, and it was an interesting event. It was so interesting that the direct live stream that I had from this event with my translation into Russian uh, was banned by YouTube at the time. Everything was legal. Nobody was consuming from an open container or anything, of the sort. But and then, but they just banned it, and I think they banned me for something like 2 weeks or a month for presenting it without any explanation. Now situation has changed a little bit, but not much.
And that's just awful.
Yeah, but people like that, I'm saying there are a lot of them in America. The various degree of success, various degree of logic, but they're all interesting and interesting to know about it. And if you're sympathetic to the cause, you can advise them something constructive. So everybody, and starting with the New York Young Republican Club, should scout for this as a possible center of events, to invite people to hear something new, something different, really different, not to look at some stale characters that would say stale things, just to bring something new and to bring new blood into conservative Republican movement.
New blood. Bravo. That's what we need. Yes, exactly.
Nick, thank you so very much. I think it was we were kind of scattered a little bit, but sometimes the scattershot is the right tactic.
Right, right. Well, thank you for having me on. Again, I want to wish your audience a very happy new year.
Same
Thank
to
you.
you, dear friend. Same to
Bye
you.
bye.
See you soon. Bye bye.